Yeah, to start off with, my interest in addiction recovery, or let's say mental health, started as I had a problem myself. I am a recovering addict, but I was a functioning addict for many years. And my subject that I spoke on in business was talking on infection control. Infection control being from the operating theatres through to the wards, to the surrounding areas. And I noticed when I called on the large private hospital groups or even provincial and military hospitals, there'd be a sort of Pondoki type arrangement in the grounds. And I was doing an inspection in the morning to check on their infection control, to report back to the surgeons, doctors, and hospital management in the afternoons as to where I felt cross-infection, or as the Americans call it, nosocomial infection, could occur. And these little Pondokis say, all right, I must go and have a look there. The answer was always, Mr. Goss, you don't need to go there. It's full of drunks and alcoholics and addicts and all this sort of thing. And I said, well, first of all, I do need to go there. And secondly, I am a recovering addict myself. And aren't you guys aware that a lot of the addiction-type people have ulcers, decubitus-type ulcers on their legs? They have dressings and bandages and that, treating these wounds. And those very same dressings could end up in the disposable areas that could end up also passing through your operating theatre units. And before you know where you are, you've got major infection occurring. And I just felt that the addicts that they referred to, full of drunks and addicts and all that sort of thing, I know a lot of people that have had addiction problems, and I believe very sincerely that it's a chemical imbalance. I don't think it's just personal abuse and not being able to do it. There are many people that can get away with it for various reasons. And I found in my experiences that by having a couple of drinks, I was more relaxed. And I had to do a lot of speeches at times because of my involvement in various sporting events. And I always felt that after a couple of grams, I would be more relaxed when I came across speaking to the people that were interested in my goings-on. So addiction became part of my life, and then I realized, and I went for an insurance test, and the doctor said, I can't pass you because you've got cirrhosis of the liver. I said, but I feel all right. He said, no, you can't do that. And I said, okay. And I was in a dilemma because the insurance policy was to cover my financial interest in a couple of companies where the other shareholders, if something had happened to me, would have been unable to find the funds to take the companies over. So I covered my life, or was hoping to cover my life, to breathe the money to them so they could continue with the running of the companies. As they had been working there for some time, and I feel that they deserved at least that. But the whole addiction scene, I have spoken throughout South Africa on infection control in Namibia and the Far East. And time and again, as I said earlier, there are these funny little buildings that they create for recovering addicts. And I was determined there and then to build something that's what I call patients, the addiction patients, or the eating disorder patients, or the depressing type patients, or the post-traumatic stress type patient, that they could be treated as good human beings without being belittled or without having stigmas attached as to why they're there, why they're an addict, or why they're doing this or why they're doing that. And that's when I had the vision of Riverview Manor, based in Underberg, southern Drakensberg. And that was in May 1999, and we've been operating since then. Riverview Manor has expanded, and the number of beds that we started with to the number of beds that we have today is increased by 50%. We then opened a facility in Durban, Musgrave, and it's similar to a step-down facility, whereas Riverview Manor is a psychiatric hospital. The psychiatric hospital falling under the Department of Health, and the Durban Choose Life falling under the Department of Social Development. And we have very good working relationships in both these two government departments. We're now branching out, and we are creating a facility in Widdenham, which is near Umkomaas, and that will be the largest within our group. It will be will enable us to be actually the largest privately owned hospital group for addiction treatment in South Africa, other than Netcare and Akiso, who are really the main investors there, being the Public Investment Corporation. But I don't view my involvement in addiction recovery as a job. I would say it's more a passion, not only because I'm a recovering addict, I was a functioning addict, so I could have got away with it, but it's more a passion of mine to see people enter our facilities and leave knowing that they've been provided with the tool to continue with their recovery. An addict is always in recovery. He's never recovered. And we're all aware of this. Those people that I work with, some of them have been up the same path as I've been, and that is pretty chronic and alcohol addiction in my case, but there could have been drug addiction, cocaine, crystal meth, heroin, wongo, whatever it may be. The withdrawal symptoms are similar, and the treatment is similar. And I'm pleased to say that our success rate of recovery or recovering addiction runs very much in line with the best ever, or best that can be obtained in Europe, United Kingdom, the United States, Australia, or many places I can name. And I think it's because of the professional approach that we make to recovering addicts. The one area that does concern me is that when people buy an old house and convert it, and you have a couple of young people running it that have just newly qualified as psychologists, and they open up and call themselves a rehab. But they've got to realize also that to be the rehab-type hospital setup, you've got to employ a psychiatrist, doctors, occupational therapists, psychologists, professional nurses, and so on. They can't be just opened up and termed rehab because it won't be supported by the medical aids to start with, although the rates can be very low. But bear in mind that if you're doing it professionally, your salary bill by employing professional people is going to be upwards of 8 to 10 times more than just a building housing people and providing them as a shelter to recover from their addiction. There are places, and I'm involved too, in charitable places where this happens, where you have 50 people in a dormitory, and they are there because they've been picked up at the robots and on the streets, living in car parks, and providing they're prepared to sign a document ensuring that they'll stay on in the hospital for 6 months. There's no charge for that. That's like a community service we get. So we have two ends of the scale. We have the boutique hotel type rehab, and then you have the rough and ready rehab for guys that have no fixed abode, they've been thrown out by their families, their marriages have fallen apart all through addiction. So it's an interesting thing seeing both sides, because the recovery rate from the professional and the recovery rate from the professional is a 21-day program, and then the recovery rate for the vagrant type one is a minimum of 6 months. And the end result is about the same, because if they stick to what they're being taught and the tools that they've been provided with by us, they should be in recovery for the rest of their lives and get back to living a normal life possibly a normal family life if they can get accepted by their families back again, and also a feeling themselves of pride. And I found when people realized that I'd done something about my addiction, that they respected me for this. It wasn't a stigma. The days have gone by, we don't tell anyone and say, well, I don't talk about it, but I'm an alcoholic or an addict. You can't hide or be in denial from this type of thing. You've got to be open about it and admit it, and you'll find that people respect you for that. I still go to my drinking holes as I used to, but I made friends there. And chat and laugh and joke and all that sort of thing, and get as drunk as a skunk with them, and I'm only drinking sparkling mineral water. But it's just the general ambience and fun and all that sort of thing. You don't need a drink to do it. Looking back as to the idea of Riverview Manor was when there was a country hospital in Underberg, and I had a property on the Drakensberg Gardens Road in Underberg, and as my children were growing up, there was a small little hospital called Riverview Country Hospital, run by a young doctor and his wife. And I used to pop in there with the children if they had, we used to call it bird tummy, caused by the fresh water in the rivers. And we got to know them, and they became friends of ours, became friends of the family. And my businesses then involved manufacturing bandages and dressings and surgeons' gowns, face masks, all those sorts of things from a factory in Kwakwa. I was really a packaging type guy, although my subject on talking was infection control. And the banks knew me, and one of the merchant banks approached me and said, Mr. Goss, we've got on our books a small country hospital in Underberg that owes us quite a lot of money. I said, oh, which one is it? Because there was only one there, and they said it's Riverview Country Hospital. And I said, I know then. They said, would you be interested in buying it? And I said, no, I wouldn't be interested in buying it because I manufacture bandages and dressings and surgeons' gowns and incised drapes and all these sort of things for hospitals. But I don't run hospitals. And then I left it at that. And it was a Friday, and I thought over the weekend, that little country hospital could serve the purpose as a rehab centre, because I'd picked up on my tours of South Africa and the Far East that no real 5-star type rehab treatment was available. And if it was outlandishly expensive and couldn't be shared by all. And I got in touch with the bank on the Monday, and they told me what the amount was that was owed, which in those days was a lot of money. I'm talking back to 1997, at 1.4 million rand. And I said, look, I could be interested in buying Riverview Country Hospital, but you've got to give me 1 month to assess the situation and see if I can put money together. They said, well, we've been offered 700,000 for the property and for the hospital as it is, which goes towards the 1.4 million that is owed. I said, well, if you give me a month, I'll pay you to the last cent, 1.4 million, to take over the debt of the country hospital. And they said, that's unheard of. We don't do business like that. We can't sort of have it in advance for a month. You've got to make a financial decision. I said, well, let's take it or leave it, but that's it. He said, right, we'll come back to you. It has to go via Johannesburg, and we'll let you know in a couple of days as to what they said. We can tell you now, it's not going to go through. Well, they came back in a couple of days, and they said, we don't know how you've done it, but the bank have agreed to give you 4 weeks to come up with the 1.4 million to take over the debt and take over the assets of Riverview Country Hospital. So on the strength of that, when I got back to Durban after staying in the Berg for the weekend, I contacted our family doctor and I said,
I want you to book me into the best rehab the country can offer at the moment. He said, all right. He said, I'll get my receptionist to find out who the people are that run the best facility in the country. And they came back to me and they said, yes, there is one, amongst others, but the one that's considered very, very good is in Midrand, Gauteng. And I said, okay. I said, can you ask your receptionist to book me in there for the program? And he said, no, I'll do that. And that's how it all started. I booked myself into a rehabilitation program at this well-known the wellness centers, they call them now. It wasn't a wellness center, it was a rehab facility. And it is, the wellness centers, one can imagine to be anything from massages taking place, facials and all that sort of thing. But mine was a serious thing. I was an alcoholic and functioning alcoholic, so I didn't need facials, massages and all that type of thing. I needed professional treatment to enable me to overcome my addiction. Now, bear in mind, all this took place after I'd had the idea of converting Riverview Country Hospital into a world-class facility for the recovering addicts. And I did my stay. In those days, the program was 28 days. It has now been reduced to 21 days, which I don't agree with, because the first 4 or 5 days, you're being detoxified and you're not really absorbing what the therapy matters are that the psychologist and the occupational therapists and others could be trying to treat you with. So I allow for 3 to 4 days to totally detoxify somebody within our clinics. And then after that, the therapy starts. And of course, they put on medication to help them through the withdrawal period, which is a very painful experience. When I arrived at the Midrand facility, I couldn't carry my dinner plate from the buffet area for supper to the table without it shaking all over the place. So by the time I got it to the table, there was nothing on it. And then the guy said, I'll help you do that. And he carried my plate and so on. And that was all in terms of the withdrawal process that I was going through. But I soon settled in, made some very good friends there, and who are still friends of mine. And I did the 28-day period, but at the same time I was learning as to how South Africa's top rehab facility ran. And it was run by a psychiatrist, general management, registered nurses, occupational therapists, a dietitian, and so on. And I thought, well, if this is the way it's done, I must find out as much as I can and start the same thing at Riverview Manor. I changed the name from Riverview Country Hospital to Riverview Manor in Underberg, and impart some of the knowledge that I've gained here in Midrand and have the same sort of setup and set it up in KwaZulu-Natal, because this was a Gauteng facility, and there was nothing then. We had one in KwaZulu-Natal that was good, and that was and is known as Lulama, which is controlled by the South African National Council for Addiction. And we worked very closely with them. But otherwise, there was no rehab facility of any substance in KwaZulu-Natal. And that was the start of the adventure. I then went overseas with my wife, and we visited rehabs in Europe and the United Kingdom. United Kingdom one known as the Priory, very, very popular with Kate Moss, who was a model, and film stars and that type of thing. And then you've got the Betty Ford Clinic, that's well known in America. And I pinched a few ideas from these places, and when I got back, decided to go ahead and create what is now a 3-storied hospital in Underberg. So we extended the small little country hospital, which consisted of 4 or 5 rooms, into a facility that now can handle in excess of 14 patients, inpatients. And then the adventure started, and I needed to have a program. So what I did was, the people I'd met at Midrand, I invited some of them down for a long weekend to my property on the Drakensberg Gardens Road, and we sat down and drew up a program. They were the psychologists that I'd met in Johannesburg. And from there on, the young doctor who had the hospital and the country hospital, I employed as a medical superintendent because he was a very, very fine diagnostic doctor. And not that he had a lot of experience in addiction recovery or post-traumatic stress disorders, but most doctors, most general practitioners have a general knowledge in every facet of illness, including mental illness. And he stayed on, and we built up Riverview Manor to what it is it's become today. And that now is the largest facility of its kind if we combine our beds in the group of the 3 hospitals that we control. It's the largest privately owned facility after Netcare and Kiso Netcare being one of the same, belonging to the Public Investment Corporation. That our group is second to that, and I think we've built up a very fine reputation. We've taken no shortcuts. We only employ professional people. I myself am an infection control lecturer, but not in any other way qualified in the medical side, other than my knowledge of infection control that started the whole issue of the rehab facility, because I was unhappy with the facilities that were offered in our hospitals in South Africa at the time, other than this one.